welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by a confirmed friend of the show. This is the third visit with this graphic novelist, comics creator, and I am so excited to talk about this absolutely gorgeous, sweet, beautiful book. So welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi. Thank you for having me again. My name is Balazs Lorinczi. I'm the writer and artist of this new upcoming graphic novel called A Bite of Pepper, and I also had two other books before that I also appeared on the podcast with called Donuts and Doom and Wolf Pitch.
They all three complement each other so beautifully. This new one is just, it is absolutely gorgeous. I loved the characters. I loved its world, which was familiar in some ways, but not in others. And I love the color palette, like just so, so much. So to lead into your new book, could you perhaps remind our listeners about Donuts and Doom and Wolf Pitch and how you see this sort of fitting into your work, your new project?
I feel like all three books have kind of like it's not a theme that like kind of like a setup of focusing on like a certain type of supernatural natural creature and exploring kind of like a narrative with them. So Donuts and Doom was about like mainly focused on a witch and who ended up getting entangled with a musician. And then Wolf Pitch was about musicians, but one of them was a werewolf and the other one was a ghost. And they are kind of like storylines tied into their natures as those supernatural creatures. And then a Bite of Pepper is about a vampire, mainly about vampires, multiple vampires, but the main character is Peppermint, who is a young vampire. And the story basically explores like her coming of age, becoming vampire, full-time vampire, so to speak, is part of the narrative. So all three books are kind of like picking one well-known creature from like pop culture and like folklore, etc., that we well know, and then kind of putting them in a scenario. But I think another main like recurring element for me is trying to avoid usual like kind of monster story tropes. Not even just because I want to avoid tropes. Tropes are great. I use them a lot, but my stories are not about what makes these people monsters. It's more just about like the human experience and how this can relate to them, that these type of supernatural creatures.
Yeah, there is a slight hint, I think, and I don't think this is spoiling anything, but there's a line in this book where somebody references reaching out to the witch and the werewolf communities. So do they all take place in the same world explicitly, or are you just sort of drawing on a similar world in each book, or?
But legally not, because they're from different publishers now. But I think every single story, because currently, like I have another book locked and loaded now, and another two that I'm working on, and every single one of them, they're gonna mention something about the larger world, even if I can't fit other creatures in the book, because there's only so many pages I can do with one story. It's always implied, I think, if I do like these type of, let's call them urban fantasy stories, that there are other things out there. Because personally, to me, it's more exciting when any story takes place in a larger, wider world. So even if this is a book about just vampires and nothing else, I threw that line in thinking like at least it's just a tiny bit of hint that there is a larger universe out there that could be explored or couldn't, but just in the back of the reader's mind, I think it expands the world. And it's nothing major. But yeah, and if you want to think that they take place in the same universe, basically, even if they don't, every single universe I create takes place in a universe where supernatural creatures are just kind of, and supernatural events and elements are just kind of a given as like an everyday occurrence.
So let's talk a little bit about Peppermint, if we can, your protagonist, and world building vampires. I'd love to know how you shape her character and your twist on vampire lore through her, because there are some sort of classic bits of, the vampire image, but you also have some new twists in there. So can you talk about, yeah, shaping that part of your world?
Yeah, it all kind of came from just the character herself. I always love vampires. Like, if you ask me what's my favorite vampires, even this is my third book, and I just got around doing vampires. But ever since I was a kid, there was something about them. Like the movie Blade, like one of my all-time favorites. Love it, love it. Not a lot of movies out there that don't like just take vampires as they are and don't portray them as evil. So basically, Pepper started as just like a little like illustration I did of the character because it was like a monthly like a prompt thing on Instagram or something for Halloween. And she's like one of them was vampire, so I drew this vampire girl. Kind of tried to do her as like a my first inspiration was kind of like that like Tokyo street fashion thing, which probably doesn't translate to the actual book, but that was the first thing with she has like double buns, and then I gave her a cute dog because I'm like, what would be cuter than a cute vampire girl, a vampire dog, who is a bit of a rascal. And from there, I was thinking like, oh, maybe I could do a book about this. What are the themes? And at the time, I was when I started to think about it, that's when I believe around the same time when I managed to finish my second book and get the publisher for it to agree to publish it, and I started thinking like, oh wow, I think my life kind of just started, even though I'm in my mid 30s. And I thought, oh, that would be an interesting thing for like vampires, how like they don't age, and the whole like themes of like not wanting to commit to things because you feel like you stop aging. So I kind of like, okay, I felt like what I'm experiencing, I could tie it into like kind of like a vampire narrative. That was like the original idea of like not wanting to commit early on to things, not feeling like that your life ends at like you start developing after a certain point. Like so many people who are like, "Oh, I'm in my early 20s and I need to figure out what my life is about." Then I remembered like I didn't figure out what my life is about until my mid 30s, basically, and that's when it started. I started thinking like, what can I do with these characters? Um, who else can I introduce? There was like multiple characters actually I had to cut from the book because there was just no space to explore them. Um, Pepper's supposed to have a dad as well, so I just focused on like the mom and the brother and Pepper's new friend Anna, who is a human, and just to see like where it goes. And I did the skateboarding because I just listened to a lot of lo-fi music, and I used to skateboard as a teenager. I just kind of had this like vision in my head of like a vampire at night skateboarding with these like lo-fi vibes, what you see on YouTube when you put on a lo-fi playlist that's not AI generated, all those like pinks and purples and like just the whole vibe, similar to the anime Call of the Night, which is like a vampire anime. Um, and that whole thing kind of just like was the catalyst of like, okay, skateboarding, what would happen to a vampire who skateboards, who has these like narrative themes of not wanting to grow up, not wanting to commit, not wanting to go through this like whole coming of age thing. So
Mm.
that was the whole thing. And as I was writing it, it kind of like started to take shape of like what the actual storyline is going to be.
Mm. It's such a really clever use of like immortality as this metaphor for growing up, which on the surface like sounds contradictory, right? Like immortality is the opposite of growing up. But like there's a lot of overlap, I think, in how those things are treated in stories. Like adulthood and immortality are both like in certain circumstances seen as a gift. Um, or a curse, like they're both like often portrayed both ways. And I think that I spent a lot of time thinking about while reading your book, like this pressure that we put on young people to choose a life before you even know who you are, you know? And I think that that's one, like, also something that kind of comes up in that metaphor. Yeah, so could you maybe talk a little bit about the sort of new ways in which you can become a vampire in this world and how it relates to like the sort of the metaphor about growing up and how that relates to her relationship with Anna, who you've mentioned?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a new thing. I can't recall any other piece of media that did this before, but there's nothing new in this world anymore, especially when it comes to vampires. So sure, someone done this before. I don't think I invented this, but I didn't take it from anything. So in this book, basically the whole thing is that Pepper is born a vampire from vampire parents. So she's because I was thinking like, how is someone as a teenage vampire if they had never been bitten? And I was like, oh, okay, so they need to age until a certain point. Is there a natural cutoff point, or like you're 18 and you stop aging? That feels weird to me. So I thought when they stop aging is the moment when they turn someone else into a vampire. And that felt like something that could work in a quote unquote real life scenario. Because you can choose when to do it. There could be downsides if you don't do it. And that I think that tied into the themes I was looking for really neatly. Um, basically, and because of the nature of the stories I'm telling and the tone I'm telling them, it never felt like an insidious thing. So it didn't prompt the character to do something evil because vampires are not portrayed as evil whatsoever in this story. It's just basically a consensual thing from both parties. Should be. It's a big thing. It's kind of like you have to choose someone to do it to, and you change that person's life as well. So you can think of it as like whatever commitment that's like a big commitment in your life, which could be like marrying someone early or having a kid with someone. Which where I live in Scotland, there's a lot of people who just have kids very early on. It just happens. I don't know why. Um, so that could be one thing, but it just could be committing to a certain way of life. 18, 17 years old, 19 years old, and like, I'm going to study medicine and I'm going to be a doctor. And it's like the next like 10 years of your life. And then you complete that and you're like, wow, I'm an adult who has this job and I have to do this now because this is what I trained for. But you make that decision very early on. So I think it could be a lot of things that the reader can kind of project onto. Not a one-to-one. I don't think anything in this story is a one-to-one metaphor to real life. I really tried not to be like the turning. This is what's called in the book turning, when you turn someone into a vampire and turn yourself into a full-time immortal. I don't think it's like a one-to-one translation to a real life event. It's just something I think a reader could feel like, oh, this is similar to what happened in my life when I was at that age. But hopefully, hope that was my aim, that the readers can be like, oh yeah, that to me personally, that felt like just the pressure in general that you feel as a young adult finishing high school, and that everyone is like, what you gonna do? What you gonna be? You need to make a decision now. The clock is ticking. You choose a profession, you choose a whatever, and that felt like what the same thing for Pepper. So it's like you need to choose someone to turn into a vampire because you need to turn into a vampire as well.
Mhm.
And the story basically explores Pepper's actions and the consequences of her kind of just not even refusing, almost just like ignoring it. Just her being, I'm just gonna deal with that later. Don't talk about that was the intention, which I think personally myself, I did that a lot as a kid, as a young adult. I was like, I'm just gonna deal with this later. It's fine. I have infinite time. I'm not an adult yet. And I think a lot of people probably did similar things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it feels very silly to me that, we ask young people to choose what they want to do with their lives or who they want to be with at a time when, like your will is not, and your will and your identity are not totally separate from that of your parents sometimes, and it's hard to know what you want and how that's distinct from what they want. And all of this stuff weighing on Pepper and this relationship she's developing with Anna, with this added pressure from her mom to sort of like find a bride, that puts a lot of pressure on relationships that don't always let them develop naturally, if that makes sense. Pepper and Anna's dynamic, because I really love their banter and like their sweetness.
This book is the least this book is the least romantic out of the three I've done so far. Considering my fourth book is done, I think out of the four, this has the least amount of like clear romance elements to it. Like the first two books were definitely like an enemies to lovers type of thing. This one isn't. But that doesn't mean this is not a romantic story. Started out as, but I had to strip away some of the romance elements because they were interfering with the larger narratives I was working on. But I still wanted to keep that, like, these two people are clearly very important to each other, but because they have to deal with this whole situation of like one of them have to make a big decision. But basically, Pepper and Anna, they meet at the start of the story and they have an instant chemistry with each other, and then Anna gets more involved with Pepper's whole family because Pepper's mom, Spearmint, want Anna to become Pepper's bride because Spear is very like she just really wants Pepper to make this decision to just become a proper vampire. She means really well, as a lot of parents do. I was very conscious of not to make the mom the villain of this story, but because Pepper is just so resistant to this whole idea. The worst thing in her head is just to make this decision. She just doesn't want it, and kind of as the story goes on, Anna becomes synonymous with this decision she has to make, which like drives a wedge between them. But they both really like each other, so obviously that's the clash with the two characters. And Anna has her own motivations because Pepper is our POV character, and I feel like I managed to convey that we mainly experience the world through Pepper. We don't really like get an example of what Pepper is afraid of. We just kind of see it as she sees it through her. She explains things to Anna. So it might even be that like what Pepper is afraid of, quote unquote, growing up, becoming a vampire, is not really like a big thing. She's a bit of a spoiled brat because she's in like an upper middle class family, while Anna is heavily hinted at that she's coming from a more not even working class background, like poverty, basically. When they meet, Pepper is attending a ball, an event, and Anna is a waitress there. And so the clash is also that Anna sees this as kind of like a big opportunity for her to be Pepper's bride and become a vampire and to socially climb, not in a bad way, just to like secure herself like a chance to do something with her life, while Pepper is kind of like drifting through life without any aims, which, as someone who I was like middle class maybe, then I experienced that. Like looking back now, I'm like, oh yeah, I was not making any decisions because no one was really like life wasn't forcing me to make hard decisions, while other people, like our secondary protagonist Anna, kind of like not even has to make decisions. She's just very happy to make this decision that's unimaginable for Pepper because from her perspective, this is a natural thing to do. No downsides really. Regardless of what Pepper says about the downsides. So that's kind of like the main kind of like driving force between the two characters, and then you have the side characters trying to influence them.
I do really love how you explore those differences in their backgrounds and how that shapes a relationship. And I think it also touches on, the difference between like what you might call like young puppy love and like what happens when that has to transition to a more mature adult, or in this case, like immortal love, where you have responsibilities and you have accountability and people that you need to sort of like maintain relationships with. It's a lot more complicated than your kind of first loves, like when you are little.
It's not even like immortal love. I feel like this whole like turning someone into a vampire thing is very similar to real life marriages, because even when you can divorce, you had a connection with a person, even if you were only married for a year. I feel like that's someone who's going to be in your life for a longer time than that. So regardless of if someone is like tied to you by like some magic as a vampire, it's still like a similar thing than to real life.
Totally, you're absolutely correct. That, yeah, even when a relationship or a phase of a relationship ends, that person is still going to be have a connection to you. And it does get more complicated. Could you talk a little bit about the color palette? Because I really love the colors that you choose. It's a sort of limited palette, but it's really expressive, and you can do a lot of different moods and tones with it. A lot of it does touch on that sort of lo-fi vibe that you were mentioning earlier. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm very utilitarian with my colors because the Donuts and Doom was like only like 3 or 4 colors really. Because I'm a one-man production basically as far as like the actual making the book goes. I write it, I draw it, and I ink and color and everything. So it would take me a million years if I would do like actual colors. But I'm not like technically a colorist, but I dabble in everything basically. So like I put a goal to myself to like with every subsequent book expand the color palette because you draw like 120, 200 pages with one palette and it feels natural. So then you can add a couple more colors for the next book and a couple more. And maybe with my like 10th book, I'm gonna be like a proper colorist. So this one was kind of like building on what I used in Wolf Pitch, but I've tweaked it a bit to have more because Wolf Pitch I think is a bit more like blue, purple, and orange with some pink, and I wanted more pink in this because pink is one of my favorite colors, and I think it's just a really nice combination with blue and purple. And then I was thinking, like, what would be the mood of the book? Like, I'm pretty sure I looked at like an actual, I can't remember the name of it. It's like a YouTube video of like an hour long, like lo-fi mix. And the illustration for that was like a very purpley pastel pinky one. I'm like, okay, that's the vibe I want for the book. And as I looked at Wolf Pitch, I'm like, oh, I could just like kind of tweak this to fit that, and then just adjust parts of it as it was needed. Wolf Pitch was very. I didn't use a lot of gradients, and in this book I used a bit more if I needed to, just like to when you have like a sunset or like a certain kind of mood when it required to have kind of like the colors kind of blend into each other. And I think that was beneficial at the end of it. But I always kind of thinking of colors as like something that helps me to and helps the readers to engage with the story. So the mood was kind of like, I'm very glad that you think that it suits the book and it gives it a good like vibe because I wanted it to happen. But my first kind of like initial thoughts were just like, what would work for this story? It's not a happy accident. It's more just like added up parts of that I needed, and then the end result was kind of like that, like two plus two equaled five at the end, basically. I don't want to sound like, oh, I didn't even realize what I'm doing. Because obviously, like 50, 30 pages, and I was like, yeah, I think this is working. And I think it got better as it went on. And I also like I've tried to differentiate night and day. Some day is always blue, and then night is always purple. That's like like that's literally my first thought was like I need a basic palette that helps the reader, and we need to differentiate night and day.
Mhm. Oh, so you've mentioned that you are working on a couple other things. Have you already decided how you're going to expand your color palette in those, or are you not quite at that phase yet with them?
Although, yeah, the fourth book is like done. I just used more colors in that one. I tried to at first I wanted to do like a two-tone one. Like my dream is to just do like a grayscale book because it would just speed things up, and I really like when it's just 2 or 3 tones of gray, and it makes production faster, honestly. Um, but I think Western publishers are a bit afraid of that. No, that's not criticism, but manga is like barely using even any grays a lot of times, and it's one of the most popular things on the market right now. But I do understand that an average reader, not even an average reader, just someone who walks into a bookshop, picks up a book, and if they see colors, then they're gonna be more excited about it. I guess manga readers are just excited to read Chainsaw Man, regardless of the colors. Um, but basically, I was told that whoever I showed the original color palette on the next book, and then like an experimental couple pages I done with like a more detailed one, they always like, oh yeah, we like the more detailed one. People just like colors. So like, you know what? If it helps to sell the book to the publisher and to the audience, then sure. I just basically used more colors on the next book to make it a bit more. It's always a hard balance to strike between a limited palette when you express multiple scenarios and multiple feelings with just like 5 or 6 different colors or shades of blue or red or whatever, than doing a full color palette, because there's a middle road between them. I think when the brain goes, oh, that's grass, but it's not green. So if you only use like 3 different shades of blue, you're not going to think, why is the grass blue? But if you use 3 shades of green, 3 shades of red, and 3 shades of pink and something else, but you don't have a green there, so you need to choose what you're going to do for the grass, then the reader might go, well, why is that grass not green? Like everything else seems fine. And same with like maybe skin tones or just why is the wall blue as well when the wall should be like something more like pinkish or beigeish. So that was a big thing in the 4th book of like how to find that color palette that could work for every scenario, but still feel like what I'm looking at is a representation of real life. Like, oh, a skin is skin colored, kinda. Um, and then the next project I'm working on, doing like a pitches for them, it's just even more colors plus adding more like I like to do like these highlights and shadows. That's my favorite part of coloring, like picking out what color would anything be. That's stressful. But when I can just put the highlights on the characters and like put some shadows and like just separate characters from the background with like these like little lights and shadows. I like to do that. Little touches. That's fun. No stress there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight into, how the various factors that shape what colors you choose. It almost sounded like, when you're trying to build a wedding guest list and you're trying to keep it small, but you're like, well, if we invite blue, we have to invite purple and green
Yeah,
and yellow, and then if we invite yellow, it has to bring all these people.
exactly. And that's a very, very good analogy. Yeah, you either keep it like close family
Yep.
or you open it up to everyone, and then it has to be the neighbor as well. And yeah, it's need to find like if you want to preserve your sanity as someone I think who does everything themselves. Because if you're a professional colorist, your whole job is to color. You have the experience under your belt as well, how to do this efficiently, obviously. But if you're like me, and I think a lot of other like graphic novelists who do everything themselves, I think you need to kind of find that middle road of like I need to make it enticing to readers, make them make kind of fool them or like fool their brains thinking what they are reading is a full color book, even if they know that this is a blue tone book with purple accents or whatever. But as they are reading it, they're not thinking about it. They're just thinking, I'm reading this book. And but you need to do it in a way that kind of helps you to make the book on time. You can, well, you can, but you need to make money, and you don't want to work on a book for 7 years when it's 150 pages long, just because like coloring every page takes 2 days.
Wow. Yeah, and then I guess like if we were to extend the metaphor, using black and white or grayscale is like eloping, which gets it done fast, but like, you're not
Yep.
going to get the registry gifts perhaps. So
It depends on. I guess it depends on the story as well, because I think because it's kind of like a symbiotic thing as well, because as I'm drawing these books, I'm like hundreds and hundreds of pages that I'm drawing with full colors. So when you draw a comic book, your art style especially if you're not like a seasoned pro with decades of experience, your art not going to look the same on the last page than it looked on the first page. With every single book, not even just with my first book. My first book is probably like the biggest like difference between the first and the last page. But even like the current one I'm working on, looking at like just what I did like 50 pages ago is different. And when you include a certain way of coloring, that really affects how you draw them because you draw them with the colors in mind. and I drew like I'm doing my fifth book now with colors in mind. So even if I'm gonna do a book that's like grayscale, I feel like I would need to maybe adjust my art style a bit to work better with just a 2-3 tone grayscale thing. Because I think I would draw with a mindset that I'm gonna add cap colors to this that would make these drawings like more like an actual cartoon that you see on TV. I think my art style is a bit like a cartoon, basically. Um, I think currently it works better with like something that resembles a full color palette more.
Nice. I always love the insights into your process, and the finished products are always so beautiful. And I'm just so grateful you returned to the show and shared your book with me again. Thanks for, sharing your work with our listeners.
Oh no, thank you for having me again, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. And hopefully the listener is going to pick it up. Hopefully my ramblings were somewhat coherent and made the book sound interesting. It's a skateboarding vampire who has a vampire doggy with vampire wings or bat wings, and there is no villains in it, but there is conflict. So yeah, that's my sales pitch.
All right, listeners, so you've heard what your assignment is now. Please check out A Bite of Pepper. Head over to your favorite bookstore, comic book store, library, website, wherever you like to go for things, publisher website, perhaps. All right, it is
Yep.
time to close this chapter. We'll see you.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.